Hey everybody, Anna Sabramowitz here. I hope you're having a fabulous Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about scenarios. One of the things that I wanted to do this week, my name is Anna Sabramowitz, of course, but one of the things I wanted to do this week is to really get into the nitty-gritty details of the difference between scenarios, simulations, interactive stories, because there's this kind of a confluence and people get mixed up about when to use them, when they add the most value. So what I wanted to do over the next couple of weeks is just spend these sessions really going deep into what an interactive story is and where it fits, what a scenario is and where it fits, what a simulation is and where it fits, so that you're not crossing over and basically mixing up things that don't add value at the right time, because these things can be used extremely strategically. So hopefully that is exciting and you want to stick around for that. So I'm just going to make sure I open everything up so that I can see all of your comments. If you're just stopping by and you're going to hang out with me and ask questions, do so in the comments. I actually get to see them. There's a bit of a delay, so I don't see them all, immediately, but they're here for you. So, all right. So hopefully that is working. Cool. All right. So first off, let's just talk about really why scenarios are so relevant, right? And what makes them a really powerful tool and when to actually use them. And if you're here, say hi. All right. So let's just really talk about what I think is the most appropriate way to describe how a person actually learns, right? Which is that something happens and the person goes, oh, what happened? It's kind of like they reflect on it, right? Then they go, I wonder why that happened. So not only do they do reflection, then they go maybe dig a little and say, I wonder why this happened this way, right? And then they think, I wonder if now here they're kind of experimenting, right? They're going, can I do that again? Can I do it better? Can I do it differently, right? And so to me, this is based on Kolb's learning cycle, but basically this is how we learn, right? Something happens and then we're like, oh, wow, that totally is weird. I didn't expect that. What happened there, right? So your scenario can actually be very much a representation of the true nature of how people actually learn. But for some reason, we mess this up, and instead of, doing this, we go straight to the why something happens. And we're like, oh, but nothing's happened yet. So why are you telling me all this info, right? So the scenario can actually be the something that happens. You're putting them in a situation immediately, like a real human, like a comfortable adult who works every day, makes decisions, drives the car, is, making financial decisions all the time. You treat them with ultimate respect by throwing them into the situation first. They're not going to cry. They're not going to be sad. They know it's a simulation. So you're not going to ruffle any feathers. Do you want to use provocative situations? Yes. Do you want to use things that are probably going to put them outside of their comfort zone? Yes. But you got to make that happen first, right? So that's really the core, as far as I'm concerned, of a scenario, right? And what is a scenario? A scenario is, and it's just a fabulous piece, because I wanted to also share this because I think this is very important, because tons of people send me their work and they tell me, oh, look at my scenario. And their idea of a scenario is giving a situation to somebody, right? They're like, oh, look, this is a scenario. A scenario is, yes, there's that setup for that decision, right? The situation that occurs, but also there is the beautiful thing of then after you've got the scenario set up, and I hope you can see this, you have some choices and then you have the consequences, right? So it's like what happened. This is the scenario over here. I should find a better picture for you guys. Here we go. No. It'll happen. Anyways, the idea behind this is that you're trying to reinforce the cycle that people naturally learn through, right? Which is, oh, wow, I thought I had, here it is. Yes. Wow. No. I thought I had all the doodles ready for you guys. Forgive me. All right. So you're setting up a situation. You're giving people choices, and then you're using the consequences to drive this cause and effect relationship home, right? Which is really critical for somebody to make a connection between these. And so you're thinking, okay, that's pretty cool, right? I can do that. Now, the big idea behind a scenario is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people at this consequence stage to really maybe get a little bit of a wake-up call as to the fact that their choice is actually, one, linked to a real effect, because a lot of people are so removed from some processes, they don't get to see the consequences of their actions for like 6 months down the line. Sometimes it's years down the line, or sometimes, let's say you're working in a call center and you're rude to a customer. If it's a huge call center, you may never get that person again. Somebody else is going to handle it for you. And I've been in those situations, right? So then you're like, how do I connect the dots for this person? Maybe they get that caller again because they messed up, right? So this is where you can play with the universe to stack the odds in your favor to help them have a real good learning lesson, right? So here's what I'm thinking. Now, when somebody is going into the scenario, one of the things that we are hoping at that point is they're already in a state where they're thinking, okay, I know that I'm in this learning space. I'm taking this module, I'm taking this lesson because I understand that it's going to help me achieve something. And it's not something for the company. It's not something for the world. It's something for me. I'm going to be more confident, more proud about the work I do, more efficient, and therefore have more time for myself, whatever that is, right? They've been sold already. They've been sold, and that's where the interactive storytelling comes in. But the scenario is there to help you help them simulate real world decisions, right? So when I say simulation, sometimes those things get a little bit too complex and complicated, but really all you're trying to do with a scenario is help people make decisions, that kind of decisions they would have to make in the workplace. And what's really cool with scenarios is that you don't necessarily have to have, like, let's say your process has like 5 or 6 steps, right? And it's like, let's say up to here, we're repairing a jet engine, right? And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be intense, and I can't really actually, I can't actually make this, simulate this because I don't have the resources. But I bet you there are some decisions in there that are very critical that you could just explain this whole process and say, okay, so John's done this, and here's all the things. Now he has to make this decision. What do you do? So what's happening is all you have to do is, instead of making this, thinking about this in a very complex way, how can I simulate the entire environment? Realize that sometimes the only thing you need to simulate with your scenario is the decision. That's it. The decision, and then what happens as a result. That's it. You don't have to go fancy. Sometimes you can just paint a picture and say, what would you do next, right? And that's where the power is, because it gives the learner agency. It taps into their past experience, but also takes the pressure off you to have to go, all the steps up to here you have to make the decision on. No, I just identify the ones where people make the most critical mistakes, take the scenario up to there and say, okay, what would you do next? And that takes, that doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't need huge simulation software. It's really about the decision. Now, to do this well, you got to talk to people who are in the field, right? I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they were designing training for insurance reps in the field. And I said, okay, so when she's like, yeah, they struggle with the sales process, and they're, they don't necessarily follow the sales process. There's no protocols there. And I said, okay, cool. So do you get to talk to them so that you can figure out, like, if this is the best choice, why they mess up? And she's like, well, I actually think that after being here for a couple of years, I already understand what their struggles are. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you've sold stuff, you've sold insurance, knocked on doors. She's like, well, no, I've read the manuals. And I'm like, okay, whatever you come up here with, the alternate choices, they're supposed to be based on the most people don't follow protocols because they can't read bullets. People don't follow protocols because they've got beliefs that are holding them back, because they've got gaps in their knowledge or assumptions that they have that hold them back. So if you think you're going to get that from a manual, you're fooling yourself and crafting things that are inauthentic and help no one. So do yourself a favor, always, always, always talk to the practitioner, because nothing's black and white. There's grays and grays and grays and beliefs and assumptions and all kinds of stuff that holds people back from making the right decision, because everything else is so compelling and the voices in their head are just as compelling, right? You got to figure that out. That's what makes a compelling scenario. If you're making this up on your own, that's cool. Sometimes you actually have to do this to give people something to critique, and that's actually good. I never make the subject matter expert come up with this stuff, because that's not their forte, right? That's what you get out of conversations with practitioners. But sometimes I'll come up with this because it gives them a good thing to critique. And then we can actually talk about, hey, is this something that you'd actually think about when you're making this decision? Would this hold you back, right? So that's what you're looking for. Now, so like I said, where do you use a scenario? A scenario is a great tool to help people practice making great decisions. Now, as far as I'm concerned, once you've got a scenario framework set up, which is easy, it's really, really easy. What happens is then we get all enamored with this idea of novelty every time somebody's making a decision, right? We're like, oh no, we can't show them the same thing over and over again. Well, actually, yeah, you can. Every time you play a game, it's not like the user interface changes and you have to make a brand new decision, right? And you have to figure out where all the buttons are again and blah, blah, blah. What you want to do as much as possible, especially when you're helping people make contextual decisions, is to make the user face completely disappear, because the focus shouldn't be on what something looks like or how something functions or how juicy your buttons are. The focus should be on, is this the right decision? So when you do that, what's really cool is then you can think about it. Okay, I've created a framework already for what my scenario question is going to be. And it's exactly the same every single time, you guys. It's a scenario, then you have some choices, and then you have the consequences. And then if possible, maybe you have some reflection and feedback, right? So boop, 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 like same steps over and over. Now, the only thing you need to do once you build your scenario basically sequence there is then add more opportunities for somebody to make that decision again and again and again, right? So you just need to get the context, and you need to talk to the right people to create compelling situations over and over and over again. Because let me get into this now. What's a scenario? Really, the purpose. It's to give people context for why they're learning all this information, right? Remember, we talked about the Kolb cycle learning experience. It's like, okay, something happened. Let me figure that out. Let me reflect on it. I wonder if there's info I can get to help me do that better, right? Okay, let me try again now with this info. So one of the things you're trying to do with your scenarios, you're trying to give people context and give them a chance to problem solve and put that scaffolding that they already have in their minds to kind of fit this in, make sense of it. You're provoking them into with curiosity. You're creating kind of a hook as to why they would even want to go on, because they now see that there's a real juicy problem they got to solve, and it's meaningful. Like they're like, oh, what happened isn't what I thought it would happen, or this is cool. I wonder where that happened. You're engaging them meaningfully at first, right? And so that's what I think a scenario is. And I've done this in the past where I've used a scenario as kind of before I share any content, I use this scenario as a piece that makes people think, it basically contextualizes what I'm going to share next, right? And what it does is you've probably heard of this before. You ask them a question so they read for the answer, right? And that's cool. But then I thought about the fact that a lot of the content that we share, especially if it's really practical stuff, like some of you have, like really practical stuff where there isn't, some of us do compliance and some companies do both, whatever. But one of the things that you want to do with all this content is where are people actually accessing it when they're out of this module? Where are they going, right? Because one of the things that I realize is people going to go back to your module to access the PDF. You want them a month from now to be like, oh, I need that answer. They're not going to click through the module, right, to figure out where the resource is. You want them to go to a sweet, searchable, awesome FAQ database of awesomeness. That's really what you want, right? And so I'm thinking that after I did this, I thought, yeah, that's good if you're sharing a bunch of content that's maybe they're going to need to see only once, or it's compliance or whatever. But what would be even better, think about this: scenario after scenario after scenario after scenario after scenario after scenario, with opportunities for them to reach out into the real database so they get practice accessing the real database to solve these real conundrums. This, to me, is the best way to use this interface, because what's happening is you are giving people opportunity to make decision after decision after decision with feedback, with reflection, but it's not focused on them reading, because that's not really learning. You can tell if somebody's making better decisions over time, right? You can help somebody practice in this space, in the space of 15 minutes. Imagine if instead of making them practice 2 decisions, you help them practice 6 decisions, right? That they're now going to be able to make better. And they got feedback 6 times. If it's awesome, they'll go back and try it again, right? That is the point. They can read content on their mobile phone or access it. I mean, this is really what you're trying to do is, can I stack these 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever I have to get them to practice making really good decisions, which is what every company wants a good staff or employee to do, right? Is make better decisions with, and access the right resources just in time, right? Can we do that? Can we do that? So if I'm giving them a scenario about Susie, I'm going to give them a scenario about John. I can give them scenarios about anything here, swap the variables, make sure that the options are contextual, and I am just maximizing this time to really shake them up in their boots. Do they got it? Do they not got it, right? I think that's really, this is the way to go. And if you think about it, that's what games are, right? Games are decision after decision after decision after decision. They help you have agency. They help you contextualize why in the world you'd be reaching out to a resource. And they give you opportunities to constantly practice, which is what most of us don't get in the real world, right? We just get to kind of just do the mundane everyday tasks. But here, I'm going to put you in the hot seat, because that's all I have is 15 minutes, right? So that's how we should be using these scenarios. Now, there's a point to when you get them here, they should already be pretty excited about the learning journey. And now they're kind of, the thing is, when you're doing this, right, if I throw you in, you are going to be challenged. And if your learner is somebody who is in a state of unaware and unconscious incompetence, let's just call it, so call it cold, what happens is if you put them into something like this, even like this, but if you put them into something like this, they're not going to get value out of it. You know why? Because they don't know that this is going to take them somewhere awesome. They might recognize some of their gaps, right? But the scary thing is, if somebody is put in a situation where they don't know what they're doing, and they're like, this kind of sucks. Like, where's this going? Okay, all right. They'll probably fall back into just apathy, really. So what you got to do to make use of all of this awesomeness is you got to get them sold that this is going to deliver to them a better way of being, a better way of decision making. It's worth the discomfort. That's basically what an interactive story does, is before they get here, they've been sold over here that the discomfort of learning something new is going to be worth it, right? So you've made some kind of a compelling story for them to go through so that they can really experience it. And here, this really can be just as if you've warmed people up that, by the way, after this 15 minutes, you get to make like 8 decisions that are super critical, help you practice overcoming objection, help you practice, really rapidly giving customers, analyzing the data on their account and giving them the right, the right information, whatever that is. I'm packing this in and also at the same time reinforcing that they're accessing resources that are in the work environment, right, that help them do this. So I hope that was helpful. Now, if you like this video, if you like this deep dive on scenarios, simulations, and interactive stories, make sure you like this video, because then what happens is the next time I go live, you'll get a notification and you'll see the next of it. So basically what I'm doing over the next 2 weeks is really doing a deep dive into these concepts, because one, scenarios are completely misunderstood. And every time somebody shows me their scenario, I'm like, no, that's not a scenario. That's just a multiple choice question. It doesn't have any consequences and doesn't have any reflection. It's not really helping anybody learn anything other than memorize, right? And also, the reason I'm doing this is because I run an interactive storytelling coaching community, and not everybody gets a chance to work with me. So if you don't get a chance to work with me, because it's not for everybody, and also we have a community of practitioners. If you're not working on a project, this might stir some ideas up, because maybe in the future you might want to craft your own interactive story. So that's what I'm doing this for, is so that you really start implementing this in your projects and realize where you can add the most value. Because like, I've been doing this for a long time. And it's funny because whenever somebody says to me, oh, Anna, I've like 20 years experience in instructional design, that actually means nothing to me, really. Because I know people who have been in a job for 20 years. They learned something in the first year, and then they've just been like doing the same thing. They've been repeating year one for 20 years, basically. And my goal is to constantly share with you guys things that have been a result of me basically running projects, learning from my students' projects, and hitting the real world with my hypothesis, right? What happened? and then learning from those hard lessons, which have been not just some wins, but some losses, but also those things all accumulate into like sweet lessons that I want to share with you. Whether you take me up on those, that's for you. I know that your context is going to be different. One of the things I did want to say is that I seriously appreciate that you're here learning about this stuff, because I think that scenarios, interactive stories, and the difference between, content sharing versus asking people to have true agency and making decisions is the difference between learning and apathy, as far as I'm concerned. So to get good at this, you got to start using it. And also to get good, you have to start placing them strategically and getting good feedback to figure out what worked and what didn't. Because this isn't a one silver bullet thing, as you'll see in the learning ecosystem, which really what I'm talking about here is how to stack the odds in your favor. The idea is not that you have this one thing that reduces, increases retention. You have this one thing that gets everybody to sell better. It's not possible, right? When we look at how people learn, it really is a journey, right? So what we're trying to do with all these experiences, resources, tutorials, all this stuff that we're putting together is to stack the odds in our favor that somebody's gonna come along for that journey. And that we're not constantly putting out stuff that is meant for people who are already sold on the journey when we haven't even sold them on the journey yet, because then that means that you're wasting your time. That means that you have an LMS full of stuff that never gets looked at, even though it's awesome, because nobody cares for it, because they're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm already good. What? I'm making quota. Right? So how can you get these people engaged? And so it's not going to be a single thing. It's going to be one book. It's not going to be one tutorial, one webinar. It's going to be a bunch of things. Scenarios, simulations, and interactive stories are those things, and they stack the odds. And this is all filled with awesome little events, basically, that take this person from a place of cold, unaware, apathy, basically. They're unaware, to somebody who's excited about this and looking for, actively searching out resources to help them, achieve their awesome goal. So that's it. That's it for Tuesday. Join me again tomorrow around 9 for more goodies about interactive stories, simulations, and scenarios. And later this week, I'll be talking about exactly where you place them. We're going to be talking more about structure, and we're going to be talking about first person and third person perspectives and how that affects the persuasiveness and influence of your story. And if that sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, make sure you click that like button or leave me a comment if you have questions about your own context and how you want to use these in your own projects. All right. So hope you enjoyed this. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Hasta la vista, baby.